All right, good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Mastercard Trade Group, and it is Wednesday, the 2nd of February. Some wild moves going on in the after-hours market. I'll go over those in just a second. Theme of the day, already, even before the end of day moves, I would just highlight that gap up days, which we saw in the market this morning, always difficult to trade. They're more for profit taking than I think chasing, but you just kind of have to remember that going into the day. Something that we talked about is that the open could have been, basically the high for the day. When there's these big earnings moves, and that might be a similar move for tomorrow. We'll have to see. Further that, but overall gap up days, I think they're difficult in general. But if you're using both sides of the markets, if you're able to put some shorts on, there was a nice move in the small caps. I missed it today, but it was definitely a nice move, and that's interesting. What was the outperformer yesterday, which was IWM and also IWC. The microcaps were the underperformers today in the indices. So I do have that over here, as well as a lot of the higher beta areas of the market. In particular, if you do look at things like the ARK funds, many of the ARK Innovation was down over 5%, despite the market coming back at the end of the day. The fintech one was down over 6% for the day. So just a crazy moves, and the separation between some of the high growth areas versus just the regular areas of the market and the S&P is pretty amazing. So also a couple of things that I've highlighted over the last couple of days. I thought that many of the high growth areas had an oversold bounce. And that was being helped by some new money being put to work back in the market, right? End of month, we talked about that. There was some pension fund rebalancing where they went back into some equities, I think, and sold some bonds. I think that was the trade. And then yesterday was the first of the month flows. And you probably heard me say this a couple of times if you watched the videos, is that there's no major second of the month of flows, right? It's the first of the month flows where just the institutions, some of them tend to put new money new money to work in the market. And then after that, it's not the same phenomenon. So sometimes you can see, that other traders kind of run with the ball as they see that momentum and stocks are going up. But I think it's a little bit of a different scenario right now. So let's go through some of these areas. But before we do that, let's talk about Facebook just for a second. It's kind of interesting. It reminds me of the Netflix earnings. If you're a growth company and you miss, these names are getting hit pretty hard. You could see where this thing is, where there's some virgin point of controls. I always tend to look at these after earnings, right? Because when price is falling like this, you'll usually stabilize where there is a previous good amount of supply, where there's been a lot of buyers and sellers that have previously met up. So there's one at 265. The next one's down at 239, and then you've got another one down at 230. So we're at 253 right now. The 265 one has definitely been taken out. But I would pay attention to what Netflix did, and Netflix did move back up because you had insider buying. And you had a couple other things going on too. You had a big investor get involved in this thing too. But this thing really kind of on the first earnings day went down to 402 and then just continued to go lower. Talk about a virgin point of control takeout, VPOC takeout down here. Here's where this thing bottomed, 357. Right down to that fourth VPOC on the earnings move. So again, powerful moves. I see Spotify coming back a little bit. I think they may be talking about some more positives on their earnings call, but they're still down. Wow, they went all the way down to 148. Pretty amazing. Let's see if there was something down there that may have caused that. You got a VPOC down here at 150. That one taken out, and I don't know if there's anything here on the 5-minute. Another one, there was one here, but I don't think there was one that was marking the low. So some crazy moves, and it just kind of shows you after the earnings from Google and AMD yesterday, you can't get comfortable. And I think if you were paying attention to the price action today and what was working and what wasn't, it's more of the things that we've been kind of talking about, that it's your lower valuation, high dividend names are acting better. Yesterday I spent a lot of time talking about it in yesterday's video about the commodities and steel names that acted well yesterday. Well, today it's a little bit different, right? So again, some bright spots in the market. I capitalized on this UNH. Right. There's some news out on UNH after hours, but I thought the setup looked pretty good. I actually added this into so I had this on in two places. I had this on in the TTG trend portfolio. This was an ad earlier in the week, and then made a nice move here. And I had to chase a little bit, but I realized what I was looking for is around 493. So the news, there's some Medicare news out, I believe, on this. I just sold the whole position in my trading account because this is kind of what I was looking. I got the target that I was looking for. I was going to keep a piece on, but I was looking for 492 or somewhere between 492 to 500, close to the previous high. So sometimes if you get that type of action, I'm happy just to, in a tougher tape, just to put the money in my pocket and kind of move on. Some other areas that, again, there's a lot of names that are reporting earnings, but AbbVie was a name that I've been watching this AbbVie for a while. I jumped into this today. Rather than waiting. It seems like every time I wait to get into a position, and act a little bit conservative these days, the stock kind of rips without me. So I just decided, I'm like, hey, I've been watching this name for a while. I decided to add this. A couple other things that, right from our weekend watch list. I like this Constellation Brands too, right? This is a name that performed really well for the better part of December, retraced about half that move and is now back into value. So just by a hair got into value. Again, I didn't wait for it. I decided to get involved. Right, here's the watch list from this weekend. I think I showed this the other day in the room too. But you could see, I kind of constructed, I did add some tech in here. And I added things like Datadog and so forth, and IT and ACN, which are holding up pretty well. But I also had things in here like CVX, right? Mastercard, which is doing quite well. Interesting with this PayPal, right? Where did PayPal done 25% today? Whew, just amazing. To see that type of a move, and amazing, like how a story can change in a stock, right? That was previously, we're not talking about one of these names that was, a story stock with no earnings, right? PayPal, Square, story stocks with, decent numbers behind them, not great numbers behind them, but a lot of people use them and so on and so forth. So, since this thing broke down, right, we've talked about this many times, and earnings in its defense, like, because I even said, hey, if you're looking for like a long trade to see if PayPal can turn this story around, usually it's earnings that it has to happen, but it's just more of the same. And as always, why I think price action is so important here is because things happen, sometimes it is in earnings that kind of confirms it, but oftentimes the stock will act weak and you don't have any news on it, right? It just begins to break down, right? And remember that I think the first time it broke down was because they were going after Pinterest, which didn't go through. And there was a lot of institutional selling since then. So, it's important to realize once these things break trend, right, look at the damage that's been done at this point. Right. And, there was something to that, going back when we heard that they were going after Pinterest, they did not have growth in their company organically. So they were going outside and looking for it. So that was a pretty good clue. If you go back and remember that time, that it was to get out of the stock, even if it was for a little bit of a loss. Look at the difference now where the stock was topped out at 300. And then broke down here below the 200-day moving average, right around 260, 265. And, the price is now half of that. All right. And then remember here too, right? This thing stabilized for a little while, but it also went in the direction of the trend, which is down. So again, it's just good lessons to, I think, review some of these names, even if you weren't in it, are in it, unfortunately. But for me, I was not in it. I got out of this stock. This was a member of the TTG trend portfolio as well as Square. And I don't remember when I got out of them. I'll have to look it up, and maybe I'll share that in tomorrow's video for when I decided to get out of this. But they were not acting well for a while. All right, so move on. So the reason why I brought this up too is because if you look at what's going on with Mastercard, I talked a little bit about these yesterday too. Mastercard, Visa, look at the difference, right? So there's a lot of these rotations, even within the same group, right? If there's a big difference in valuation, and again, they are different companies, right? They do different things, but people are moving, funds, whoever, are moving towards more of these type of trades right now. And, the best thing that I can kind of say with this, and again, I can't give any advice or recommendations. In fact, I forgot to read the risk disclaimer, but here it is. Read the whole risk disclaimer here. But sometimes the best thing to do is cover up the symbol a little bit, or, think of it, as I went over in yesterday's video. We said, hey, well, American Express, people should be booking more travel, right? And that's, a lot of times they do that through American Express. So if you could come up with a story that at least kind of helps you a little bit, because I know these names are kind of tough to really get excited about. There was a trader too in the room who mentioned IBM to me a couple of days ago. And I said, well, I'm not really, too excited about IBM. And, IBM is starting to kind of look interesting here. It actually broke the February valuary to the upside. So, again, you don't have to take, my opinion, don't have to take every one of these, right? But if you could formulate a story around, a couple of these things that are just acting better, then I think, it's a better way to go. Now, a reminder, as we look at the S&P, right? A couple of things that we outlined in the pre-market session today is that we've got this move up, and this is a little bit of, being what I refer to real cute in the analysis, is that, a move up and possibly we could kind of come back in here and test the 200-day moving average. I have no idea if that happens, but what I like to do is just think about multiple scenarios. I don't like to make predictions and, come up with, the crystal ball predictions, but I do like to kind of think about what could happen here. And I think, if you've made a little bit of money the last week on buying the dip and so forth, taking some profits, which I believe I talked about this in yesterday's video too, end of day video, and then maybe, waiting for a little bit of a pushback, right? Some people think that the low is going to be taken out. I don't know that either, but I would pay attention to, if we start moving back to the downside, I would pay attention to that 200-day moving average and what happens in there, right? I also outlined in yesterday's video too, right? I said, if we, and I didn't know that we were going to take this out by today, in the morning, pre-market, was that this 1 hour VPOC was taken out too. I thought this was a great place to take some profits. Same thing in the Qs. So exactly what I went over in yesterday's video. I mentioned there's a 1 hour VPOC up here in the Qs taken out, and now we're coming back in and we lost that momentum. Remember, I've talked about this also. Sorry to repeat myself, but what I tend to look for on these, either when we're coming into resistance or coming down into support, taking out one of these virgin point of controls, is a change in momentum, right? So not just taking it out, because, you could see that many times back in here, we just kept on taking out these levels. So you have to look for a change in momentum. To me, that's a change in momentum, right? We never actually got above this thing, and then we started to kind of move down, and then we're losing the momentum here. All right, so that's a couple areas of the market. I brought up the trade blotter from before. Yeah, I did some trading today. I was quick with Microsoft in the beginning of the day, even though I wanted to get more in that trade, but it's not a market, right, in my opinion, to be greedy in, right? I even tried buying a little bit of AMD after it kind of sold off middle of the day, but I stayed in that trade for a little bit too long, right? I ended up getting out of that at 122, so that's a little bit of greed. Not that I wanted it to earn just $1.50 on the trade, but that's how it is sometimes. All right. And one other trade that I tried this morning and kind of just decided otherwise was Sienna. Just wasn't convincing enough to me. And it started to sell off, and you can see it's kind of getting hit with tech. And the other thing too is, these earnings reports, we are still in the heart of earnings season. We're going to get many more earnings reports. Tomorrow's Amazon, and that's probably going to shake the market one way or another, right? TMO is one name to kind of watch in the next couple of days. Really good earnings, good company. I'm actually hoping that this one kind of comes back in a little bit. If it comes in and retests this 570, I'll definitely be a buyer in here. But I decided not to chase, and I didn't want to play it for earnings because it's a very high price stock and the options are super wide. All right, guys, more to talk about besides that. But we'll leave it here. I got my first target finally in this FCG ETF that I talked about yesterday. All right. So all in all, not that bad. And one of those markets too, where if you miss a couple of these landmines, you kind of feel pretty good about it. All right, guys, have a great night. See you tomorrow.